The exhibition, An History of Gardens, Its Art in Literature and Treatises, held at the National Library of Portugal, was only due to the cooperation of a lot of institutions. I am especially thankful to the National Library and to its team, especially Manuela Rego, Gina Rafael, Paulo Barata, and the designers Maria João and Catarina Crespo, but also to some institutions such as Centro de História da Arte e Investigação Artística of the University of Évora, and also to Parques de Sintra Montalua, who has contributed with the movies that are inside, and to Lisbon City Hall. This exhibition held at the National Library of Portugal is about the circulation of books interesting for the art of gardens and gardening in Portugal between the 15th and the 19th centuries. It gathers most of the books that on this subject that are at the National Library, with some contributions that come from the Library of the University of Coimbra and of the Carlos Gulbenkian Foundation. What is amazing about this collection is that what we have here was not bought in the 20th century, like many other great libraries with this kind of books. What we have here at the National Library are in fact the books that circulated in Portugal during the early modern period, because they come from the convent libraries, from some private libraries, and so the books are signed, they have marks that tell us who were the owners of these libraries. So the information that each of these copy gives us about the circulation of knowledge and of this kind of art is very interesting, and it has to be taken into consideration. Now, we have divided the exhibition into 5 main nucleus. We have started with this first one that is entitled First There Was a Garden, because in fact before a woman and a man have met, there was a garden, the Garden of Eden. And then the second nucleus is going to tell us about agricultural treatises, because they were the most important in the 16th century, for example, to spread ideas of art of gardens, just by including a chapter in the compendium. Then the third nucleus is about the garden of pleasure. So in fact we have there all the books that are necessary to create a garden, such as the gardens of Fronteira, Queluz, or even Versailles. In the fourth nucleus we have entitled Locus Amoenos, is the locus for love, is in fact about the books that we have to create the romanticist garden. As you are going to see, some poems and novels are more important than art treatises of English landscape garden here. And that is also interesting to compare with the creations that we have made. Finally, we have a nucleus dedicated to the scientific knowledge. So there we will have some books on botany, some dictionaries, and though in that nucleus it's the only one where we are going to find Portuguese authors. That is also something important to highlight. This illustration comes from Nicolas Bonfons' book, and Le Délice de la Campagne, and it tells us about how good was life in the country when compared with cities. It not only invites us to get in the exhibition, but also recalls that all those values, those virtuous values of the country life were to be taken into consideration, and also explain how successful was art of gardens and landscape during the early modern period. From usefulness to beauty, this nucleus shows us the treatises of agriculture that have been more important in Portugal. So here in the 16th century, the most important were Alonso Herrera, Teobaldo de Jesus Maria, and especially Gregório de los Rios. Gregório de los Rios says he wants to do something different from the other agricultural treatises, because he says he wants to write only about gardens. So he says that in gardens that should be only flowers that are beautiful for sightseeing. And he also says that fruit trees are not proper for gardens. Those are for orchards, with one exception. And that exception are orange trees because of the ornamental character. And we know how important orange trees are in Portuguese gardens. So, thus, Gregório de los Rios seems to be talking about Portuguese gardens. The other book that we have included here is Ibn Alawan. Although it is a 19th century copy, we are convinced that the manuscript circulated in all the Iberian Peninsula since the 12th century until it disappeared off circulation, probably with the Catholic kings. But that knowledge is then incorporated probably in the Castilian authors such as Alonso Herrera and Gregório de los Rios. In the 16th century, besides the Spanish authors, we also have some important Italian and French authors, such as Luigi Alamanni and Charles Estienne. For example, Charles Estienne is one of the most important authors of the 16th century, known in all Europe. This importance of the French authors will increase until the 18th century, when it will completely dominate the production of this kind of books. For example, in the 17th century, there is still one very important Spanish author, Miguel Agustín, but the most important book is Le Théâtre de Agriculture et Ménage des Champs by Olivier de Serres. Olivier de Serres is considered the father of the French agronomy, but it's also very important in Portugal because it was owned by the Marquis of Fronteira. So we think that the Marquis of Fronteira had this book that would tell him everything about the good management of the farm, and also would give him very important ideas for the parterre de broderie that he was building in Fronteira. Because Olivier de Serres is the first book to include Claude Mollet's designs for the royal gardens in France, even before they were published by André Mollet. La Maison Rustique de Williger is one of the most important books of the 18th century in Portugal. As we have seen, as we have already said, French authors will become each time more important, and as the title of this nucleus suggests, from usefulness to beauty, each time in these agricultural treatises, art of gardens will have more importance. And as we already have seen with Olivier de Serres' treatise, and also here with Louis Liger, for example, they already include a lot of suggestions, ideas for parterre de broderie, parterre géométrique, so that people could could create them in their farms. We have included this image of the labor in agricultural fields that is included in Louis Liger treatise, because it is like an inspiration for all of us. Labor omnia vincit, so work always wins. The third nucleus, entitled The Garden of Pleasure, gathers all the books that are necessary to create the Baroque garden. We have started this nucleus, or the starting point for this is a very influential book for the Italian garden, the Ipnerotomachia Polyphili by Francesco Colonna of 1499, because all the action, it is a novel, but a very well illustrated one, and with many gardens and elements of gardens, and it is all the novel, all the action is in gardens. So Polyphili in his search for love will pass through a lot of gardens, and gardens in the landscape are frequently described in this book. So that is the starting point of this nucleus. Then the second book that we have considered essential for pleasure garden in Portugal is the Garden of Hesperides by Giovanni Battista Ferrari. Because in fact the Garden of Hesperides at the western point of Europe and a garden with orange trees as it is depicted in the image behind me is really the Portuguese garden. It seems that he's talking about the Portuguese garden. Now this beautiful image of a man and a woman under an orange tree will again confirm, underline the idea that since the beginning we wanted to show in this exhibition, and to cross art of gardens with love between a man and a woman. The book by Giovanni Battista Ferrari, The Garden of Hesperides, is in fact about citrus. And just to confirm what I was saying, that in fact the Garden of Hesperides recalls the Portuguese garden, all the illustrations that are behind me are from the book by Giovanni Battista Ferrari, and we have found one Aurantium olicipunense, so an orange from Lisbon. And so it seems that there is really an association between the Garden of Hesperides and the Portuguese garden. In this nucleus we are going to find treatises on art of gardens, treatises of architecture, books on hydraulic, books on water management, mythographies, so everything that is necessary to create the Baroque garden, but also descriptions of very important gardens, such as the Hortus Palatinos by Salomão de Coze. In this book we are going to find many features that have been an inspiration for the Palace of Fronteira, so that also show us how up-to-date were our patrons. Olivier de Serres has divulged some treatises of Claude Mollet in his Treatise of Agriculture. But then we haven't found until now any of the most fundamental treatises to divulge the French formal garden by Jacques Boisseau or by André Mollet or even Claude Mollet, published by his son. So the first one that we are going to have here to divulge the ideas of André Lenotre is the book La théorie et la pratique du jardinage by Xavier d'Argenville. Furthermore, we have some treatises on architecture, such as La Maison de la Campagne de Charles Brizot by Charles Brizot, which are also important to this universe. And then we are going to have also proper books to divulge forms and techniques to create fountains and sculptures. To create fountains, we did not have the figure of Le Fontanier, for example, as they have in France, we really need all the knowledge, the design, and also the water management. We need books to inform us of all this. So we have, for example, to inspire the design of fountains, we have books such as The Prince by Giovanni Battista Falda, or even Le Recueil by Charles Lebrun. Le Recueil avec tous les dessins de Versailles. And these are fundamental books to spread ideas for fountains and cascades and grottos. But we also need the books about the hydraulic systems, and for that we have Les Raisons des Forces Mouvantes by Salomon de Coze of 1615, and also Belle-Idor, Architecture Hydraulique, which has one volume only dedicated to water management in gardens. if one wanted to make a garden, could take ideas and information for the minimum detail from these books. For example, for vases, for portals, for greenhouses, for water jugs, even for flower display. All these can be found here, as we can see in the images behind me. But also there is a very important section of books to inspire the forms of pagan gods or allegories. For example, if one wanted to represent a Venus, we could find images in some mythographies, or much better in Ovid's Metamorphoses. But also, for example, if an artist wanted to represent the idea of beauty, he could take the Iconologia by Cesar Ripa and search for beauty, and probably find again Venus as the goddess to convey the idea of beauty. The garden in Portugal of the 19th century is much more a romanticist garden or a picturesque garden than a landscape garden, as it was created in England. And that may be explained also because of the books in circulation. So what we have here are mostly some treatises by French authors divulging the modern garden, and also translations into French of some very important English authors as Thomas Whately. However, it seems that some poems and novels became more influential to this art of gardens of this period than treatises. For example, the poem by Delille, Les Jardins, we have a lot of editions of the poem, but it was also translated into Portuguese by one of the most famous poets, Bocage, and it translated like this: Os jardins, ou a arte de aformosear as paisagens. This translation seems the best definition for gardens. Gardens are the art of turning landscapes beautiful. Besides that poem, there is also a novel, a very important novel by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, La Nouvelle Héloïse, where all the action, just like at Hypnotomachia Polyphili, all the action happens in gardens and landscapes. So it is also so influential for the gardens and of the period than treatises, or even more. As the other group of books that we have included here in the fourth nucleus are some very precious books like Hortus Romanus, 6 volumes full of illustrations of different species. Besides those beautiful illustrations, we have also the dictionary by Henri Bayon, who has also the most amazing illustrations, when what was more important was the species depicted or the art itself. And we have chosen some of those illustrations to show in the exhibition, so they are just behind me.